So I was saying we're going to be talking about the histogram. The histogram on Lightroom is located at the top right. A quick little overview on the histogram here is showing you the range of tones from the darkest area of the image to the lightest, from black to white. So this image that we're looking at was taken by a 7-year-old, Tristan Chandler. If you're watching, you get to watch it. Thank you very much for sharing this image with us and allowing us to print it for you. By the way, congratulations, because it got an honorable mention at a statewide competition. Going back to the histogram, I wanted to make a couple notes here that are important when we evaluate it. On the post that I wrote about the other day, I talked about how important it was for us to have clear white and a clear black definition on the histogram, because when you look at an image on paper, basically you're looking at reflected light, and it lacks like that brightness punch that you are able to get when you dial up your brightness on your monitor. So here we are. I already edited this image. It's actually on its way to Tristan at the moment, but I'll walk you through the process and how we got it to print. So first things first, we're going to go into the develop module. The develop module is where you're going to be able to make any adjustments to the image. So again, like by looking at the image in the develop module, we see clearly that the image lacks a true white point and a true black point. I'm going to click on these two buttons here, and basically what they do is they allow us to visualize clipping on both ends of the spectrum. So again, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to make manipulations to this image. This is basically the final edit. This is where you got the tones. You're done with basically everything that you wanted to do to that image, and you're basically ready to getting it to the printer. So basically the last step in your workflow. So here I have already made 3 copies of the image. Let's say the first one we're going to do is, what I would do is create a virtual copy. So I'm not going to do that now, but basically with this, it will clone your image, and this is exactly the first pass. Like I said, I had already made some manipulations to this, but we'll go through all of them for you here. So looking again at the image, we talked about the fact that it lacked the white point and then the black point saturation. So the first things first, what we wanted to focus on is on the white clipping, and how I do that is by moving this, clicking here on the histogram and pushing the white out. That's one way to do it. You could also do it here on the sliders. That's the first pass that I'll do, and then from there I'll make any adjustments to the edit as we go. So as we could see, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make sure that our white point is clipped, and the reason for that is because again, after analyzing the image, there's going to be areas where you really would want to see whiteness on the paper. So the hair area here on the head, you see this white spot on the eye. That's definitely something that we want to be white. Otherwise, what this is telling the printer is that there is no white, so it should ink it with some gray. And that would basically make the entire image grayer than it already is because of the reflected light effect. So I went ahead and the clipping, I pulled the whites all the way up until I saw some clipping happening. I'm okay with that. It's again like the first pass, but I'm happy with where the clipping occurred. That's exactly the areas that I just mentioned that needed a little bit of whiteness, if you will. And the same thing goes with the black. So here on the nose of the dog, we want this to be true black. We want some blacks around the eye. Not anywhere else. There's no clear areas that would need like very deep blacks, but those areas here that are clearly black, otherwise they would be a range of gray instead of black on the paper. So again, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull the blacks out to clip them a bit, and I'll show you what ended up happening. Here we are. Again, we talked a little bit about that eye that we wanted to clip some area there. We wanted to clip some area around the nose, basically to provide that detail that we would lose while transferring the image to the print. So now that we're done with this first pass, the next thing that I want to do is look at what happened to my edits, comparing them to the original image, and I'll do that here by comparing the images here using the reference window. I'm going to pull in the original. I'm going to keep my edit here. This is the one that we're working on, and I'm going to zoom in into this area of the nose, and what we can see here is that there is detail on the nose here, this little hairs. We want to be able to preserve them and not lose them when we print. What we see here is that those have been blown out. So what we want to do is now use our brush tool, this guy here, and we're going to create a mask on the dog. Here it is. The mask is running over the area that we wanted to work on, and to make sure that those hairs are preserved. And then we go down to making some adjustments to the white. We are going to turn this off, and we're going to see what happens to our image. And let's look at the mask as we were talking about. Here it is, and we're going to zoom in into that area of the snout. So as we play with the slider here, what we want to be able to do is to bring out back the details. So you see that as I went through the passes, those details are starting to become more visible. That's basically where I was able to recover those hairs. Again, looking at the brush, I pushed out the whites. I brought in some black to give a little bit of contrast there on the snout, and basically recover the detail on the hairs that were lost when we pulled the brightness and the whiteness up. The same thing we would do for the blacks, but for the time being, I'm extremely happy with where they are at. So there's really nothing that we want to do to the blacks at this point. So in this step, I'm pretty much done with the histogram. There is some clipping on the blacks. We see where that's happening. There is some clipping on the whites. We see where that's happening. We know that this area here, as you can see, is clearly white, and you see that through the clipping. We talked about this area in the eye. It's going to be white, so basically no ink is going to be laid on there, which is what we expect. Nothing gray there, because then again, like it will prevent us from really enjoying that image in its full range of grays. So the next step here is to actually look and see what will happen once we transfer this to the paper, and we do that by softproofing. So as soon as I click that button, softproofing, this is what's going to show me what that image would look like on paper. So immediately something changes. I'm going to do this a couple times so you can see in this area. If I turn off softproofing, there is a constricted menu here. But as I click softproofing, it opens up. It gives me a little bit more information. This is where all the ICC profiles that I've created reside. And then what we're going to do is we're going to simulate the paper in ink. You see that as soon as I hit that, something happens to the image. And what's happening here is actually the display monitor is trying to show me what that print would look like once we print it. It's a simulation of what would happen. So we see immediately that we lose a little bit of the contrast, especially in the nose here. We talked a little bit about preserving some of those blacks. We clearly see that those are pretty much gone. But the other areas of the hair, the eye are fine. So I'm happy with that. So the next step here is to actually create a proof copy. And I've already done that for us. So we talked about the nose here losing some of that detail. So what I did is I pulled the shadows up a little bit, basically to create a little bit more contrast between the blacks and the whites. We see that I still preserve the blacks inside the nose. The blacks in the eye are still there, but I regained the detail in the nose of the dog. Again, this is the before, this is the after. If we hadn't made this change, what would have happened is that on the print, we would have lost completely the detail on the nose, and that would have been just black, or basically a black gray, and we would lose some of that detail in the nostril. So this is basically what made me happy. I went ahead and printed this version, and you'll see the final copy before it actually went to Tristan. And hopefully you learned something today about the histogram, about how to manipulate it on a black and white image, and how it affects your image. Again, these edits that I'm making are exclusively for print. I think that the work that Tristan did up to where he landed on this image were great. Again, we are constrained by the devices that we're using to edit our images because of that transient light that's shown through the screens. It's just when we're thinking about printing that image, we need to make that extra step. We need to take that extra look at what's going on in the histogram so that when we get to the paper, it's actually what we were looking at the screen. Again, it's not going to be one-to-one, but at least the intent will be there, and that's the beauty of it.